Is this thing on? Hey guys, I'm Raquel. Welcome to my channel Out of the Past, where I talk about all things classic movies. And this is the latest episode of the Classic Movie Roundup. Each week I share 3 classic movies that I watched and my thoughts on them. I talk about the classic movie book that I'm currently reading, and I'll share a Wildcard segment, which is just some fun stuff that I found on the internet that previous week, which I wanted to share with classic movie fans. So if that sounds good to you, keep watching. First movie that I'm talking about this week, it's Speedy from 1928 starring Harold Lloyd. This is a Criterion DVD set that my good friend Nikki gifted to me. I believe this is one of her top favorite movies, and one of the things I love to do is give away my favorite movie, Bachelor Mother from 1939. So I was really moved and touched by the fact that she shared her favorite film with me. So, and I know that she's a huge Harold Lloyd fan, so this is extra special. So Harold Lloyd plays the character Speedy, and the plot of this is a little convoluted, but really it's the misadventures of Speedy, who is trying to save his girlfriend, played by Ann Christie's, Pop's horse-drawn streetcar business, which is a sort of transportation business that is kind of going out of style. It's been replaced by automobiles and by the New York City subway system. So Pops is one of the last vestiges of this kind of old form of transportation. And in the meantime, Harold Lloyd's character Speedy is absolutely obsessed with baseball, specifically the Yankees, and he's always trying to keep up with what's going on with baseball, but that gets in the way of his multiple jobs, including one job as a soda jerk and another job as a taxi driver, which is kind of interesting considering that is a technology that is basically the new like transportation method that's replacing Pop's business. But he is absolutely going to save Pop's business, because if Pop's doesn't have his streetcar going every 24 hours, he will lose his track that in which he carries customers, and some greedy businessmen as well as some goons are out to set to make sure that Pops doesn't run his streetcar for a full 24 hours. So basically, Harold Lloyd gathers up his trusty dog as well as uses some ingenuity to make sure that he saves Pops' business. Speedy is technically Harold Lloyd's final silent movie. At the time, he was at the top of his game. He was even more popular than Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton, and all 3 of them were the triumvirate, the silent film trio of comedians who just basically took over the business, and who we still love today. And 1928 was a difficult time because it was a transition in the industry from silent film to talkies. But Chaplin and Keaton and Lloyd had all developed their skills in the silent film format, and that's how they shot all of their fun stunts and scenes. So that transition was difficult for all 3 of them. 1928 is actually pretty late for a silent, because already at this point you have movie studios moving into talking pictures or even just part talkies. Lonesome, which is a film by Pal Fejos, one of my absolute top favorite films, also from this year, also takes place in New York City and kind of captures the hustle and bustle of the city. That became a part talkie because of when it was released, just so late in the silent era. So Harold Lloyd did make one other silent after this. He might have made more after this, but I do know that Welcome Danger was filmed as a silent film and then converted into a soundy, a talkie film. And I have actually seen the original silent version, which had not been released to the public. The sound version had. I saw it at Cinefest in 2015. And actually, that's the only way I've seen that movie. So I think that's pretty cool. But what was available publicly, Speedy was his final silent film. And this was quite a production because it takes place in New York City, and it was filmed partly at his studio in Los Angeles, but a lot of it was actually filmed in New York City. And that was very, very hard to do because New York City at the time really was a bustling epicenter of activity, and it was not really a place where they were filming a lot, specifically Manhattan. I mean, you have like studios out in like Astoria, and you have some filming in New Jersey, but Manhattan itself was quite difficult to film. So this was an epic ordeal, and it's really fantastic. You get these beautiful scenes with Coney Island where he takes Ann Christie for a date. Those are really fun to watch. Babe Ruth, who of course we know as the great baseball player, he's a character in the story. He plays himself, and Harold Lloyd's character Speedy is a huge fan and gets the opportunity to take him from this one place, like this orphanage where, you know, Babe Ruth is handing out these signed baseballs to these orphans, and he's got to get back quickly to Yankee Stadium, and they go on this like crazy ride down to Yankee Stadium, and it's a wonder that they even survive within the story because Harold Lloyd's character is always looking back at Babe Ruth, and Babe Ruth's like, "We're gonna die." And when he drops him off, there's this really great shot of Lou Gehrig, and you kind of see him in the window of the taxi and kind of walk off screen, so you kind of see a little snippet of him. So Babe Ruth is like a really like strong character in the story. There's lots of really great misadventures. I really, my favorite part of this is actually the dog, played by King Tut. This is the dog actor's name. And I actually really, really hate movies that have dogs as characters in them, because I'm always worried the dog is going to die, or the dog is at least going to suffer somehow. He's going to be hurt. I just don't want to see any dog suffer. So, but in this story, the dog is actually a hero. He's the one who basically helps Harold Lloyd's character Speedy solve the mystery of who these goons are who are trying to disrupt Pop's daily streetcar service. And the first scenes we get with the dog are basically he's trying to endear himself to Harold Lloyd to get food, but then he sees that Harold Lloyd does give him food and a little bit of attention and convinces him to adopt him. So there's no harm that comes to the dog. So if you're worried about that, no harm comes to the dog. In fact, even the slight threats of danger he escapes from. So he's just the star of the show. And he's just really, really adorable dog. And I love how they employed him in the story. And I really like the themes in particular. I really appreciated the overall theme of hard work and versus greed, because you have Pops, he's a hard-working man, and he has this kind of old form of working, and you see the community of other horse-drawn streetcar drivers, and you see how they have this pride in their community, but also in their work, which is missing with the villains. And the villains are basically greedy businessmen and these goons from the criminal underworld who can be bought out by money. So it's basically money versus pride in your work, which I thought was really interesting. And there's also a lot of focus on old versus new. You have where Pops lives and works is the quieter part of New York City, where it's at a slower pace. There's still a strong sense of community, and where Harold Lloyd Speedy's world is the hustle and bustle of New York City. That's like there's a joke at the beginning where you take like Sunday's shower on Saturday. Like everything is just, it's like a big rat race. And there's no opportunity to really slow down and appreciate things. So I think those themes were really, really interesting. And of course, Hurrell was such a brilliant physical comedian. He's got those iconic glasses, and he's just really great. This is him at the top of his game. And you kind of wish maybe that the silent era would have lasted a little longer, so he could have made a few more features after this. And this is as I said before, this is the Criterion set. This is the DVD set, but there's also a Blu-ray set available, and comes with a booklet and 2 discs here. And I really actually enjoyed the extras. So the commentary is on the first disc, and that has Bruce Goldstein and TCM's Scott McGee talking about the film. Scott McGee really gives you a lot of background on Harold Lloyd and the different actors in the film and Christie, and then also goes into Babe Ruth, whereas Bruce Goldstein gives you a lot more about the production of the movie, how it was filmed in New York City, what parts were not filmed in New York City. And the second disc actually has a documentary just with Bruce Goldstein comparing all of the on-location shooting and showing you what clearly is a set, what clearly is on location in New York City, and what clearly is Los Angeles. And it comes down to the very minute details like the lamps and the telephone wires and how, LA streets had these traffic bumps, whereas New York streets did not. This particular chain of stores was only in New York City, and this other particular store was only a chain in Los Angeles. So I thought that was really interesting. There's also like other extras on the second disc, and one of them was really great is basically a little mini documentary on Babe Ruth with all of this historical like archival footage of him. I live for that stuff. I'm not even a baseball person, but I was just eating that up because I really love that. And the person who hosts that, I forget his name, but he does a really good job kind of contextualizing Babe Ruth and where he was in his career during this film, during the different archival footage he shows, and kind of the trajectory of his career with the Yankees. So that was really interesting. Speedy is also available on the Criterion Channel streaming if you want to watch it. It's also on Max. And because it's a silent film from the 1920s, it's going to be more generally available. I did read that this is going to be in the public domain starting next year. So it will be very, very much available next year. You'll see a lot of good and bad copies out there. But I did actually really enjoy this Criterion collection set. This is actually spine number 788. And again, I want to thank Nikki for giving me this. I will treasure it. The second movie I'm talking about this week is The Suspect from 1944. This is directed by Robert Siodmak and stars Charles Laughton and Ella Raines. And this is part of the Criterion Channel collection Noir by Gaslight, curated by Farron Smith and Nemi. Last week I talked about one of the movies in that collection, Ivy, from 1947 with Joan Fontaine, which I really enjoyed. And I wanted to watch something else from that collection and talk about it this week. So I stumbled across this one because it sounded really interesting. So Charles Laughton stars as Marshall. He is a kind of meek shopkeeper, kind of does his business and goes home. He's just very, very sweet and understanding and empathetic to others. And his home life is quite different. His wife, Cora, is just really bitter and angry. She's kind of resentful towards the life that now they lead now that their son is grown and has fled the coop, now that they're empty nesters. She's quite miserable, and he doesn't seem to know what to do about that. And he finds what he can't get at home, he finds in Ella Raines' character, Mary. She's this young stenographer. She's obviously quite distraught, and he kind of takes her under his wing. They start to court. They go out on these dates. They go to the opera. They go to local eateries. They're basically dating, and he is giving her the guidance she's looking for, and she is giving him sort of the youthful enthusiasm that he's lacking. So one mysterious night, the gas lamp goes off, and Cora, the wife, falls down the stairs. We don't see this. We just know that she went up the stairs, and that the next day or a few days later, there is a funeral happening for her because she fell down the stairs. Now, this inspector is quite suspicious because now Marshall is free to marry the stenographer Mary, played by Ella Raines, and that seems like a little too soon. What happened there? What's interesting about the story is we don't know if he pushed her down the stairs. We don't see it. We don't know what happened. There's no flashback back to the scene. It's a complete mystery. We assume he did it, but we're not exactly sure because he is such a kind-hearted character. Now, the inspector is on his case, following his every move, trying to gather evidence, and someone who plays this kind of evil character, it's his neighbor. I'm forgetting the character's name, but essentially he is the opposite of Marshall. He does not work. He is used to being a kept man, essentially. He goes out and drinks every day. He beats his wife. He's just a terrible, terrible person. And it's very clear that he expects to be kept with the family money that he acquired through marrying his wife. And he also wants money from Marshall, who works for a living and has this income. So he finds an opportunity to sort of blackmail Marshall, offering an opportunity to keep some information from the inspector about the case. And Marshall, this whole other side of Marshall comes out, and he actually poisons the neighbor. So now he's committed an actual crime. We don't know if he committed the first one, but now he's actually committed a crime. So, and then it unfolds from there. I don't want to spoil it for you. Now, I really enjoyed The Suspect. I really appreciated the theme of, working men versus, the well-to-do kind of blue bloods who are expected not to work, and how it looks bad on them to work. That's something that once you get fully into the 20th century kind of disappears, where pretty much everyone is expected to work. There is a great line which I wrote down when I watched the movie. Now, this is the character Gilbert Simmons, played by Henry Daniell. He's the evil neighbor who basically is beating his wife and taking all of her money and trying to get money from his neighbor Marshall. Right before he's poisoned, he says, "Your lot was created to make life easier for my sort. The meek shall inherit the earth. We inherit the meek." Not bad. And that really spoke to that theme in the movie about the different classes and that sort of social clash. And I thought that was super interesting. I also really like how gaslight was used, how it said that the gas lamp was shut off when the murder happened, if it was a murder of Cora falling down the stairs. That was really interesting. And then just in general, Charles Laughton's performance as this very sympathetic character, and you just want him to get away with it so badly. And Ella Raines is really absolutely magnetic in this. You can tell why Marshall is falling in love with her. But once she marries him, her character turns, and Ella Raines does a great job kind of being like a young ingenue, kind of naive and very just passionate and empathetic. And then she kind of turns into basically, I'm the female head of the household, what I say goes sort of thing. You could see a shift in her character, and she does it really well. You could kind of see her becoming the next Cora, and you kind of worry for his character. Like, is he going to try to get rid of her too? So I thought that was really well done. So as I said before, this is available on the Criterion channel as part of their Noir by Gaslight series. This is also a universal release like Ivy, which I had mentioned before, so it is a little more difficult to access. I don't believe this is available on physical media, so you may have to rent it on VOD if it's available there, but I do know if you do have the Criterion channel, it is available to watch there, so make sure you catch that series before it goes. This is the 1947 film The Unsuspected, and the reason I chose this one is because I had just watched The Suspect, which I just talked about, and I thought, wouldn't it be funny if I talked about two movies with similar names? So this is The Unsuspected. It's directed by Michael Curtiz and stars one of my absolute favorite people, Claude Rains. So Claude Rains plays this radio star and crime writer. This is basically his show is like a precursor to the True Crime podcast. So he plays Victor Grandison, and every week on his radio show, he talks about a murder, like whatever happened in the news recently. So these are real murders. He's not making them up. But he becomes a little too involved in these crimes. In fact, he finds the killer and blackmails them to give him information. And in some cases, there are people around him who are disappearing. Like, for example, his secretary Rosalind is discovered hanging and dead, and he basically fakes a suicide note, but really she's been murdered. And we know that from the beginning. And we also know that his wealthy ward, which I'm not really sure what that means exactly, but she is wealthy and he's keeping her as sort of like he's the mentor. I think it's made clear that he's a bachelor, so we don't think he's actually sexually attracted to her. But Matilda's played by Joan Caulfield. She actually gets top billing, even though this is very clearly Claude Rains' movie. She was lost in a shipwreck, but then she makes it back home. It's very, very strange. And when she makes it back home, this guy, Stephen Howard, is like, "I'm your husband." And she's like, "What? No, you're not." But basically, Stephen Howard is kind of playing off the fact that she was in the shipwreck, and he's essentially gaslighting her into believing that they just got married before she left on her trip, and that because of the accident she lost some of her memory. But she's dead set against learning that he is not her husband. And the reason he wants to pretend to be her husband is that he knows Rosalind. He's, I think, a family member, and he wants to find out what exactly happened to her. So the only way he can access the world of Victor Grandison is by, sorry, that's my dog groaning in the background, by entering the world of, Matilda and of Victor Grandison through pretending to be Matilda's husband. Audrey Totter plays Althea. She is the niece of Victor Grandison. She basically stole Matilda's one true love and married him, and now he's an alcoholic, and basically everything she touches goes sour, essentially. She is very protective of Victor because she knows that's kind of where her situation and her wealth, as well as her comfort level, comes from. So she kind of protects him. And then as the story progresses, we're finding out more about what Stephen Howard is trying to do, and how Matilda is kind of ruffling some feathers, and how Victor is dead set on protecting his image and protecting his radio show, which also is produced by Constance Bennett. She plays a small character. She plays a minor character. She's kind of filling in for the Rosalind character who passed away, but she also is like his producer at the radio show. So there's this murder mystery happening. What happened to Rosalind? Who really killed her? And then Victor tries to get rid of Matilda and Stephen, and we're trying to figure out like how that's coming about. It's really, what I really love about it is that it incorporates that element of radio. I think that's really fascinating, and I love how stylish this movie is. Like, Claude Rains is impeccably dressed. He's got this like Connecticut mansion where he lives, and he travels into the city for his show, and all of the characters go to these like really fancy nightclubs. They're having these beautiful like little cocktails, and they're all dressed to the nines. Audrey Totter is fantastic. She has that like look, always like the stare, like she's suspicious of everybody except for Victor. And it's just like this, it's a very glossy mystery. It loses steam so early on. I would say even like a third of the way through, especially when Matilda comes into the picture. Everyone thinks she's dead, and she appears, and now she's got a husband. It starts to lose steam. It picks it back up at the end when there's real danger, when there's real stakes with the characters. That's when it starts to pick up, and when the truth starts to unravel about Victor and about Stephen. So it does pick up there, but there's a good chunk of it. I mean, it's only an hour and a half long, I think, if my notes are correct. But it does lose steam. So it is a short movie, so you can get through it. Just think of like the first 30 minutes and maybe the last 30 minutes of being good, and maybe you could take a bathroom break in the middle. I do just love Claude Rains, and what I love about it is that he drops these lines throughout the film that kind of speak to the evilness of his character. I wrote a couple down. One is like, I rather enjoy playing God, and that really speaks to his character because he wants to manipulate everybody. He wants to be God. If he wants you to be around, you'll be around. If he wants you gone, he will get rid of you. And then another line that kind of plays to that, he says, I detest scenes not of my own making. So you can really see that he's an actor. He's like this radio star, and he's created this kind of criminal world that's attracted so many audience members to like tune into the radio show every week. And he just feels like superhuman. Like the laws don't apply to him. Morals don't apply to him anymore. He's sort of elevated to the status, and that leads to his downfall. So the book I just finished, which I started to talk about last week, is this one right here. George Hurrell's Hollywood Glamour Portraits 1925 to 1992. It's written and curated by Mark A. Vieira, and it's included a foreword by Sharon Stone. This was originally published in the 90s as Hurrell's Hollywood Portraits, and then it was published as this, George Hurrell's Hollywood, in 2013 as a hardcover edition. This is a paperback reprint, sort of expanded edition on the one that came out in 2013, George Hurrell's Hollywood. So this is the paperback. It's got 50% more images than that hardcover had, and all of those images have been restored. So this looks its absolute best, and you're getting more. So if you have the hardcover, highly recommend upgrading to this. It's worth it because there are so many images. I don't know about the text, if that was edited or expanded upon. I believe the end felt like he was talking more about the production of his book. So I felt like maybe that had some more added text, but it could all be the original text, like lightly edited. But what really is additional to this is the extra images and the fact that they've all been lovingly restored. So if you don't know who George Hurrell is, and most classic film fans will either know his name or have seen his photographs. He was a well-known portrait photographer who worked during the heyday of the studio system. So he worked from the late 1920s into the 40s. He worked for MGM and he worked for Warner Brothers. He was also an independent contractor, and he worked for like Howard Hughes. He did the famous The Outlaw photo series with Jane Russell that blew up. And that also made that movie really popular before it was even released, and it was released like years later. He also worked, I don't know if I mentioned this already, but he also worked for Columbia. But his most famous portrait subjects were Norma Shearer, who her and Ramon Navarro helped him get into the business, essentially, because this wealthy socialite introduced George Hurrell to Ramon Navarro. Ramon Navarro liked his work. They did a photo set. He recommended George Hurrell to Norma Shearer. Norma Shearer really wanted to convince her husband, MGM executive Irving Thalberg, because she really wanted to be in the Divorcee, kind of a steamy pre-code drama, and he didn't believe that she could be sexy enough, so she did this beautiful sexy photo shoot with George Hurrell, which completely changed his mind, got her the movie role, and then thrust her into a new phase in her career, where she went from like these silent like romantic comedies into these sexy pre-codes, and then she would move on to her prestige films later on in her MGM career. And he photographed her throughout that. He also did these amazing photographs of Jean Harlow, Clark Gable, Humphrey Bogart, Joan Crawford, who's on the cover, was his most photographed subject. They did 33 different photo sessions together. So basically over a big period of time. And what this book does really well are two things in particular. I really enjoyed how Mark Aviera, who is a photographer and a film historian, and who also had a working relationship with George Hurrell sort of at the end of Hurrell's life and career. I love how he describes the techniques that Hurrell used to photograph the stars. I think it was interesting, like how there were a few techniques, like for example, he would have an actress lie upside down on the floor with their hair kind of cascading backwards, and would shoot that upside down so it looked like the hair was kind of flying upwards for a very dramatic look. He would have his actresses like Carole Lombard or Jean Harlow or even Greta Garbo pose in white or in light colors, which would really draw them out, especially in black and white photography. Most of this is black and white photography. There are some instances in the book where we see George Hurrell's work in Kodachrome, but it is mostly black and white. And you can see here, this is a beautiful spread of Paulette Goddard in white, and then Mary Pickford there in white as well. Look how stunning those are. And some other techniques he used, he retouched the photos by lightening the irises of the eye and adding a single dot to each eye to kind of brighten the eye and give the eye a sense of emotion that would basically transform the face, which was really interesting. For his male actors especially, what he would do is he would light a spotlight on their head, on the part of their hair, which would add this dimension to their face. It would cast a glow on that part of the hair, and then it would cast light on one side of their face and kind of add shadow to the other, which made this really beautiful composition. He would sometimes backlight the actor, so they'd have sort of this halo effect behind them with this one spotlight shining on them in a particular way. And the work is absolutely stunning. I highly recommend you check out. You can even just Google George Hurrell movie star portraits, and you can find a lot of amazing things. And another thing I really loved about this book is how the author really goes into detail about how networking was essential. It was all about who you knew, and the fact that George Hurrell met Ramon Navarro, who then introduced him to Norma Shearer, who then brought him to MGM, and then then all these other people he worked with, and it was all about networking, who you knew, and like, you know, his connection to Greta Garbo, and Greta Garbo ended up being his landlord for one of his studios, and how, you know, some work he did with Mae West early on in his career led to some work for Mae West with her final film, Myra Breckenridge. And the book also discusses his legacy tour during his life. After World War II and throughout the 1950s, his work kind of dissipated. But then there became an appreciation for his legacy, for all of these beautiful movie star portraits. And the author goes into how these negatives and these prints were collected, how they were turned into photo books, how they were turned into museum exhibits that traveled all across the country, and also how it kind of revitalized George Hurrell's career. And at the end of his career, he was photographing people like Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner. And one of the last photo shoots he did was with Sharon Stone, who wrote the foreword of this book and shares a bit of her experience. So it really covers the whole breadth of George Hurrell's life and career with a focus on the career, which I really appreciated, because he did have some scandal in his life, 3 marriages, some affairs, some financial difficulties. Those are briefly mentioned, but it's not the focus. So it's very much the focus of his career. So last week I talked about the top 100 film books that Hollywood Reporter had listed, and this is actually on that list, somewhere in the 60s. So you know this is a good book. Definitely get this, new from Running Press in this beautiful paperback edition. So for this week's Wildcard segment, I have 2 things that are on the internet that I wanted to share with you. The first one was a tweet from Martin Turnbull, who is the author of the Garden of Allah series. He shared a program that is now on display at the Academy Museum, and it's the program for the first Academy Awards, which were held May 16th, 1929 at the Roosevelt Hotel. And what I really liked about the program is actually the menu. This is what everyone attending the Academy Awards got to eat and what were served at the banquet. So the menu has hors d'oeuvres, which are celery, olives, nuts, and rolls. Consommé Celestine, which I learned is a clear broth clouded by egg whites and garnished with herbed crepe noodles, which I thought was really interesting. Filet of sole sauteed in butter. A broiled chicken on toast, a half broiled chicken. Now, some people were talking about this. It's just that it's not that it was half broiled. It's a broiled chicken, but half of one. So half of a broiled chicken on toast. New string beans, long branch potatoes, which I learned is an early term for French fries. Lettuce and tomatoes with French dressing. And for dessert, vanilla and chocolate ice cream, cakes, and demi-tasse, which is just a single espresso. And I just love this. This actually sounds quite delicious. I would probably skip the consommé Celestine, but everything else sounds delicious. I would definitely try this. And I just thought how cool. I love those old menus, and the fact that this one exists from the first Academy Awards I think is so neat. Now, because I talked earlier about The Unsuspected, which is a radio mystery, I thought I'd put you on to one of my favorite channels on YouTube. It's No Soap Radio Recreations. It's this group of fans who just love Jack Benny shows, those old Jack Benny radio shows. And what they did is they used Zoom and like editing software, and basically, although they're all over the United States, they come together and they recreate these old shows. They have on their channel, they have 3 Jack Benny shows and then 2 other shows. One is Our Miss Brooks, and they just released their latest one, Suspense, The Whole Town Sleeping, which I'm so excited to listen to. These are so great. Everyone acts out the different parts, the different characters, even the ads are acted out. They're so well done. They get that transatlantic accent down really well. They do just a fantastic job. These are so enjoyable to watch. I just really love them, and I hope if they get more subscribers, maybe they'll do more of these awesome radio recreations. Well, that's it for this week's show. I hope you enjoyed it. Just to give you a sneak preview, some of the books that I'm reading next will be AKA Lucy, The Dynamic and Determined Life of Lucille Ball by Sarah Royal. If you like the Lucy and Desi documentary that Amy Poehler made, she does the foreword for this book, you're going to be interested in this one. And then also the new book by Donald Bogle. I just love Donald Bogle's books. I have a review of Hollywood Black on this channel if you want to check it out. This is Lena Horne, Goddess Reclaimed, and this is a new TCM running press book that just came out last month. So I'm really excited about this one too. And I want to hear from you guys. What have you been watching, and what have you been reading? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.